o'clock, and we'll open this meeting for Wednesday, June 25th, of the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency. And if you're already here, you don't need information on how to submit comments or to watch online. So we will go right forward to roll call. Amy?
Good morning, everybody. We'll start with a roll call. Board Member Audette? Here. Board Member Cry?
Present.
Board Member Gallagher?
Here.
Board Member Plummer?
Here.
Board Member Kellstrom?
Here.
Board Member Resner?
Present.
Chair Watkins?
Present.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. If you'd all rise, I think I'm going to ask the tallest man in here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, please join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
John, could you introduce your staff?
Happy to do that, Chair Watkins. Good morning to the Board of Directors. Welcome on this wonderful June morning. As we get ready, I think for next week also for 4th of July celebrations. I hope you enjoy that as well, since we won't see you again until October. With introductions this morning, Executive Assistant Amy Lindsay and Accounting Clerk Kelly Irving are helping manage the meeting today. Kelly's getting a little behind the scenes just in case Amy's ever not here for some reason. So we are managing the meeting today, along with Associate or Assistant Planner Warren Beauregard. Here in the room with us today is CFO Jessica Carlson, Senior Planners Jennifer Pullum, Keith Williams, and then Michael Cooker. And then we also have Associate Planner Nolan Kalui here with us this morning. One announcement I have, although she is not here, is we do have an intern this summer, Abigail Carlson, not related to Jessica Carlson, here in the office. She comes to us. She's a local resident. She's attending Humboldt Polytechnic University, need an internship. It's a requirement of their program, and before she gets to her senior year. So she's with us in the afternoons. In the mornings, Reading gets to benefit from her with their school and kids leadership programs that they have in the morning and kid activities. So she does that in the morning, comes here in the afternoon. So it's been nice to have someone young from the area interested in, planning. And so we're hoping to give her a bit of a what's the full office experience like. So then there might be opportunities to see her this summer, but she's off doing some of the other activities this morning. So that concludes introductions here.
Thank you, Sean. We do not have a workshop, but we're going to go right fast forward to Fix 5.
Fix 5. All right. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Watkins. My name is Carrie Maltz. I'm in Program Project Management at Caltrans District 2, and I am here to present the SB 45 report. It's the agreement that we have between SRTA and Caltrans that we will always come and twice a year give you an update on the financial status of the project that we're co-sponsoring. This is the Fix 5 project. This is a little recap of what this project is all about. It's the it's basically between Hartnell and 151. And we're going to be adding a third lane in the median, closing the gap between Hilltop and 270.
And Shasta Lake.
Shasta Lake. Yep, 151 on Shasta Lake Boulevard. And we're also extending auxiliary lanes. There will be the aux lane that comes from 44 up towards Hilltop. We're going to extend that all the way to Lake Boulevard, and there'll be a 2-lane exit at Lake Boulevard. We're also going to have the aux lane from 270. Let me make sure I get my notes right. 273 to Oasis. And we're going to be adding some big overhead signs for traffic management. Some of these are like the brand new colorful ones, which will help direct traffic in case anything's going on up the canyon. Closures, direct them on a different highway, stuff like that. A few other changeable message signs just to help direct traffic. The big thing about this project is it's a managed lane for part-time truck-only operation. So that third lane going into the middle is going to be a managed lane, and it's now going to be truck only from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. It used to be 24 hours. Now it's just during the peak times of congestion. So the rest of the time it'll be general purpose.
So that's a change since last time we.
That's a change since the last time. Yes. Status of the project, we have completed design. We are expected to go to the CTC meeting in August, seek allocation funding for it. Once we have that, we will advertise and get our contractor on board before Christmas. And so construction would start next year. Our other next steps is we do need a final conversation with CHP in Sacramento. That's happening tomorrow. Sean is going to attend that one. We do need final FHWA approval for the project. We anticipate we've had conversations with them. We just need to formally get it in writing from them. And that is that. So going through the
Ross, can you post that? Thank you.
Any questions on the scope of the project before we move into the financials? Okay, so under the program funding are all the different funding types. Non-shop is all of the STIP funds, the TSIP funds, and it's a lot of acronyms, and I'm going to spell them all out for you. So STIP is basically your guys' fund. It's the State Transportation Improvement Program through SB 45. And then the CRISA, the CRRSA, those are coronavirus funds. SHOP, that's us. That's the State Highway Operation and Protection Program. It's basically taking care of our assets on there. Our portion of the project is the combination of our SHOP project is improving the median barrier. It's actually a proactive safety job. Plus we'll be improving some pavement and some drainage and stuff along the way. This saves us both money by combining the projects together. And then going on TSIP is the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. And that's funds for any kind of freight improvement project. So you can see they're putting a big chunk of money up. The 16 and the $53 million. The truck only lane is why we have the TSIP funds. So TSIP supported us because it's truck only. So we got the project going. And then the community funding, that is the earmark from Congressman LaMotha. Who gave us $3 million for the project. So the entire project cost, at the end of the day, we have the 85 million for the non-shop plus the 34 million for the shop. So big project. That includes all support, right-of-way capital, construction capital. So, and if you come down the side where it says FY, that stands for fiscal year. It's the environmental PS&E is our design. Those are the support costs for design, right-of-way support and right-of-way capital, and then construction support and construction capital. So everything, as you can see under the unfunded non-shop need is all zero. It means we're completely funded. We're good to go.
Any board members have any questions for Carrie?
When does this project expect to be completed?
3 years, 3 seasons. So starting next year and 3 summers worth. It's sort of end of 29.
So the total's around 200 million, basically, roughly.
No, like 141,
41.
yeah.
Roughly what they spend in Anderson.
Yeah, this is a very
That came in
similar
early,
to
so-
what we call Razzle, the Reading Anderson 6 lane.
So then when you get that all fixed, then you're going to put an on-ramp on at Hilltop. Is that correct?
You know, I've heard that before. I haven't seen it written down yet, though.
I think it was from Chair Watkins, you heard that.
Yes.
She even sat through, she let me come into her office and try to make the case as to why they needed it. It didn't go over real well.
No, I keep trying. Any
Okay,
questions?
any other
What are
questions?
the anticipated disruptions during construction for those exit ramps there?
Oh, good question. Yes, we will. I don't have all the details of that, but I do know that we have periods of time where we'll be shutting down ramps. I think mostly it's nighttime work, but I do believe we have a few extended closures on that. And I'm sorry, I don't have all those details for you, but I can get up.
Thanks.
And I do believe we need to work with the city approval on that one too. To get that right.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. So we're on item 6, public comment period. We'll start first with anybody in this room. Is there anybody present physically that would like to make a public comment? Amy, do we have anybody online?
I do not.
Well, that makes it quick. We will close the public comment period. We have a consent calendar and there's a number of items on it. They'll all be with one vote. Is there any board member who would like to pull an item? I have one question on item 7.7, which is the trolleys. And when it first came to us, we thought that they were just a low base car, but they're actually hybrid trolleys. And I was just kind of curious. They're used vehicles, and I understand they work something like a Prius. They start off on battery, and then after they go some short distance, I guess a diesel engine starts up or runs the generator and also provides, somehow it works.
Gasoline, not diesel.
Oh, it's gasoline, okay. So I was curious that these are older vehicles and what the condition of the batteries is. We're putting 300,000 into it. And I was just wondering if they're all in good shape or if that's going to be another immediate expense. So
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I think we have John Ando, Rapid Transit Manager, available remotely online, but I'll let Jen just come up as well first.
Yeah, and if you look at the second attachment B with the colored images, you can see that although they are used vehicles, the mileage on them is about 1,200 miles, so they have not been used that much. And after discussions with John Ando, Transit Manager of the Reading Area Bus Authority, I'm under the understanding that the warranty for the batteries comes along with the vehicles, which is a positive because we all know that those batteries do degrade over time. And with that, I'd like to see if John Ando is available to answer any further questions.
Chair, should you pull that
I did-
regular discussion or do you?
I thought we could just discuss it and we could still take it all as one item. So I really think you've answered the question that I had. So does John want to add anything else? Is he connected?
I'm here.
Oh, hi.
Can you see me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Everything that Jen said is correct.
Okay. Well,
That price is also delivered from North Carolina.
Yep, and that's for two.
That is-
Yeah.
150,000.
And
And
what is
no
already out
additional
there?
cost to us for the delivery.
No, there just is one.
They have a similar one in Cleveland County,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'll make a motion to pass the consent calendar.
Can I ask a question first? Can I ask a question? Are we gonna name them? Because I think we should name one Vanessa and the other one Audette.
We talked about.
No, they have to be.
You got your wish.
There's no second
I
for
remember.
that.
You
No
got
second for that.
I think you have to be deceased to get trouble.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, on the consent, I have a first.
And I seconded it.
Yes.
So by Adet and then by Kelstrom, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. We are now on item 8, which is Sean's executive report.
Thank you, Chair and Board. So I do have a few brief updates on several different topics for you. And on some of it, it's related to stuff we've been seeing in the news lately. But one of the things I think that we talked about before is this board had approved a support letter for an extension of the Secure Rural Schools Act. And we know at the federal level, there was a 3-year extension proposed as part of the federal budget deal. In terms of federal budget for the reconciliation package for next federal fiscal year, which will start on October 1st. That is still in discussions between the two sides of the houses. The House has passed their budget. The Senate is still working on their package budget for the next fiscal year. It's understood that supposedly the Senate may reach a budget proposal for a vote tomorrow. In terms of transportation impacts, there's not only is a lot of the investment under the current transportation bill there are additional investments that the Trump proposal had as well as the House, including a increase in $770 million for major infrastructure on the national highway system and on the national freight network. There was also another $400 million proposed for rail safety grants. So that may benefit well for our region where we talk about the Mission 273 project and rail safety at grade crossings. There could be some benefit there to pursue funds. There's also included $824 million for airport improvements. And there's also an additional $700 million being proposed for the national bridge programs. So there's a large bridge program they call kind of a regular and then a rural. So depending on the size of the region and the size of the project. One thing that the current budgets through both the Trump administration proposal and House is elimination of the electric vehicle charger program. That is proposed at a $5.7 billion cut if all of that was to go through. And if they're actually able to roll back all of the prior items before to a certain point. Some of those are still in contention with courts about how far back any cuts Congress can do and the way that it is set up because of how the original federal bill on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed. So those are still in discussions, but if it was, we could see upwards of $5.7 billion cut from there being redistributed across other needs. One interesting item of tracking that came out of the House budget was what does the state of the future federal transportation bill, the highway trust account, look like, and how do we make sure that's funded? We are coming up to the existing 5-year transportation bill for at the federal level is going to expire in September of next year. So the Congress is going to start having those conversations of what does the next bill look like. There's a lot of discussion about at the federal to keep the infrastructure bill focused on transportation infrastructure and deal with other types of infrastructure needs separately within separate bills rather than lump a bunch of different national infrastructure needs like dams and highways and airports and other non-transportation infrastructure together, utilities, for example, and keeping the transportation bill a transportation bill is one discussion. But there's been some questions because Government Accountability Office, which essentially is like an independent analysis like what we have here in California for the latest legislative analyst office. They looked at some things with the Highway Trust account and said, based upon what Congress has passed for budget perspective, we're good until 2028. When we get to 2028, with the way that they've set up their funding and the funding bills that they do, we have a potential issue of insolvency related to how the Congress has allocated funds for transportation infrastructure. An interesting element with that is starting those conversations. A number of members within the House have started this conversation. What does that look like? How they get ready for the next bill. And there is some proposals also because of the transition that's taking place, both even with federal efficiency, fuel efficiency standards, and the adoption of zero emission vehicles across the board nationally, that we are losing some revenue at the federal level from fuel taxes because one, vehicles are more efficient, two, more zero emission vehicles. And so they're having early discussions about adding an additional, essentially per vehicle annual fee to battery electric and hybrid vehicles. So that the parity of what we pay with a gas or diesel vehicle on an annual basis on average is on parity with zero emission vehicles. Based upon what's been out there, the first proposal has been potentially to charge $250 per battery electric vehicle and $100 for each hybrid vehicle. Now, there's still some definitions of how they define hybrids and if they have to have a certain MPG, miles per gallon efficiency, whether it kicks in, not really sure. But it at least was part of the House budget package. The Senate has not ruled or included language there. There are some also saying instead of doing it like on the personal vehicle side and maybe charging it just up front as part of a vehicle purchase with manufacturers. So there's different approaches that are being discussed on there. But I think what it's meaning is at some point, we'll probably see a little bit more parity between, regardless of the fuel of your vehicle, having parity amongst everyone paying a fair share within it because of the impacts and the needs to maintain national infrastructure. So we anticipate that will be an ongoing conversation, and we may even see some language in the budget bill for the feds this next year, or definitely some more concrete language in the next surface transportation bill. So we're watching that to see what that might mean for revenue for the state and or for our region. On the surface transportation bill, last month, myself, as along with executive directors from Butte, Nevada, Placer, and El Dorado counties, I met briefly with staff, with Congressman LaMalfa and Kylie, to talk about the next federal transportation bill and provide some early feedback. They wanted some early feedback of rural regions, what's important, what works today with the existing bills, what could be improved. And a lot of things that we identified was, especially, is that a lot of rural regions are excluded from a number of programs, and so are not able to apply. We also mentioned that when it comes to eligibility for a metropolitan planning organization, such as us, to participate, at the federal level in a lot of programs, they've excluded MPOs that have a population less than 200 or 250,000. That doesn't work well for rural regions. So we talked about being able to allow those regional agencies to partner with cities, counties, their transportation department, with Caltrans for us, on different programs to be a part of that. We also had made a case of like streamlining the process. We highlighted that when IJA was passed, we had all these additional programs, right, that we're having to track. I mean, I think that the last discussion with Caltrans, looking at it, was like we have over 200 different grant programs just for transportation across all these different agencies. So can we streamline that? Have less programs so that way also your city staff, your county staff, state transit department staff that have to go for certain competitive funds, have less applications so they're focused on implementing projects rather than writing up why these are good projects in the first place. We also advocated for more formula funds. So where funds would flow down faster to regions, because the faster it gets to cities and counties, the faster those projects can get completed. So those are some feedback items we gave to them. We'll see where the future conversations go, and we'll continue to stay engaged over the next year and a half for the next transportation bill. In terms of state budget, real briefly, it looks like negotiations for the state budget for next fiscal year are wrapping up. Reports are, as of this morning, that a budget deal may have been made, and that the state legislature may vote on the budget on Friday in order to get it to the governor before July 1st. One of the things that we were tracking was it was suggested as part of the governor's May revise is reducing the funds in the SB 125 program for transit operations and capital and redirecting that to CAL FIRE, which was a proposal for wildfire. A lot of different folks got up and said, wait a second, I thought the whole purpose of whether you like it or not, but the whole program is to support transit operations, reduce emissions, et cetera, and how that was not going to be helpful in the process. It appears now the state legislature governor have agreed to, they're not cutting the transit operations and capital funds, but they are looking at other fund sources to fund more wildfire activity so that we can manage our forests, our state lands and other stuff much better. But the details of that are still unclear, and so we're waiting to see what that looks like. Couple of the last things, as you've probably seen if you've been checking out the early June report, effective July 1, we will see an increase to the state excise tax on fuels for gas, diesel, and aviation gasoline. That it happens once a year, or may happen once a year on July 1 under Senate Bill 1. Gas fuel taxes are going to go up 1.6 cents per gallon, diesel 1.2 cents, and aviation fuel 0.4 cents. There was no proposed increase to aviation jet fuel. And I'll just note that this is based upon the transportation revenues that we have under SB 1. It was passed in 2017. The last item I think it has been a bit of a bunch of discussion. I know a couple of you at least reached out and said, what does this mean for SRTA? So I hope to give this some perspective is the status of California's EV mandates, and then recent actions by the Trump administration and Congress at the federal level to undo several of those. So let me put in perspective what that does impact and where we see that impacting us today. On June 12th, the president signed 3 congressional bills overturning California's ZEV mandates, which includes the Advanced Clean Cars 2, Advanced Clean Trucks, and the Heavy Duty Engine and Vehicle Omnibus rules. Subsequently, soon after, the California Attorney General, as long as Attorney Generals for 10 other states, sued based upon those bills that were signed. What makes those more significant is that originally at the start of his administration, Trump administration did some executive orders, which can be much more easily challenged throughout the courts of how those fit administratively. Now with the bills is going to go through this court process to be reviewed. And so that's where we're at on that side of things is we have to wait to see, we have yet to see where there's a date where a court will consider whether to stay, what President Trump has signed, whether they will have those stay in effect, how will that play out? On that same afternoon, Governor Newsom did sign a new executive order N-27-25, essentially doubling down on some of this current state administration's efforts. It reaffirmed targets that were set back in 2020. The governor had directed the Air Resources Board to develop a new Advanced Clean Cars 3 regulation, which essentially is meant to serve either 2 proposed purposes, either to enhance Advanced Clean Cars 2 if it survives the rollbacks at the federal level through the court system, or as new regulation that would have to fit within whatever is federal level for emission standards exist. So we have yet to see what that is. It's just some wording really to come up with some new regulation. There'll be a whole state review process of what that looks like, public input, all of that, that cities, counties, special interests, the transportation industry, everyone have an opportunity to participate in the future. The Air Resources Board also, I asked to identify and update any public available list of light duty manufacturers who are still going to continue to certify and follow the existing 3 regulations. He also directed several state agencies, notably the Air Resources Board, the Energy Commission, government, what we call GoBiz, CalSTA, who oversees Caltrans, CHP, Office of Traffic Safety, and a couple other departments, as well as the
High-speed rail authority.
Yes, High-Speed Rail Authority.
Sorry.
Department and the Department of Consumer Affairs to identify additional actions the state could take to advance zero emission adoption. They're required to provide a report within 60 days of his executive order. So we'll keep an eye out for that this summer to see what that looks like. And specifically, the governor is asking for ways in how can we make things less expensive. How can, we help encourage adoption. So we'll see what those look like between the different agencies. On top of all that, last Friday, there was a Supreme Court case that ruled that oil, gas, and auto manufacturing companies do have standing in court to be able to challenge any state's regulations that impact them. There was an ongoing court case related to a number of industries that said, hey, we're being regulated, whether it's California or other states. And we're just trying to say that if we're being regulated, it may have a negative impact on our business, our industry. We should be able to sue. They were getting stopped at certain lower court levels. So the Supreme Court has finally ruled, no, if an entity is being regulated by the government, it does have standing in the court to challenge components of that regulation or any regulation in total. So this won't just mean for the transportation industry, but any industry in general. The Supreme Court's ruling essentially helped clarify that about for anyone impacted by government regulation. So I think, we'll see positives in that respect for any industry to be able to, figure out what's fair in that process. What does that mean is we will probably see some future lawsuits from the auto manufacturers and oil industry and other industries on California's transportation rules. So This is not over and done. But what does this really mean for us here at the agency, for SRTA, in our role to do transportation planning? Really, right now, it's kind of a wait and see at the moment. There's kind of all these things going on. We have existing federal requirements that we have for planning and programming projects, working with cities and counties and Caltrans. We do have also state requirements. A lot of those are still in place until we receive guidance about how to make changes. So for the moment, it's not going to change anything that we're going to do. We could see some guidance at both a federal or state level within the next 6, 9, 12 months. It does sometimes take that long for those agencies to roll those out to us. And then as those guidances are provided, we will then adjust our operations and what we do for workload. And we will also review if there's any adjustments for impacts to our regional transportation plan and what we have in terms of future needs, whether it impacts our programming documents as well. So short term, business as usual. Long term, I expect we will see some changes. When those happen, we'll report on those, as we'll probably provide, future items to you for approval or review as we move forward. That board concludes my report for this month. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those.
Any questions for Sean?
Can we control the climate in this room? And
Yes.
just stop with
Would
the
you like it to go up?
cold air? I thought I was in sweater.
Do I call that climate change?
I'd like to climate change this room. Make a motion to raise the
To raise the
temperature.
thermometer.
All right, it looks like we got it there for you.
Thank you.
It thinks it's 98.6 degrees in the room because you're sitting right beside it. By the way, just for the record, that's why it's running.
That's why it's cool.
That's good. So
So you're gonna have to move away from the thermometer, the regular.
Vanessa,
It would be helpful.
please say you're fine before Corky takes his shirt off and gives it to you, because he's motioning to Matt for Matt to give him the jacket, and I know Corky well enough that he'll do it, literally.
I do have, help me understand on the Cal Fire thing, redirecting those funds. You've mentioned that it would be, you've mentioned forestry management.
Mhm.
My understanding is Cal Fire doesn't have anything to do with managing the forest. They put fires out. Is that, are they now expanding? Every other government, California
sorry.
is expanding, or am I?
You're probably correct on that. I misspoke in that case. Yes, for fighting wildfires, responding to those, being prepared and everything.
Yeah.
What I saw with the other element missing there is that from the news this morning, it appears one of the things that Governor Davis may revise was he said, hey, I want to extend the cap and trade program. He wants to rename it Cap and Invest. However you want to think about that. Part of his proposal suggested reduction funds to SB 125 program and others to fund CAL FIRE wildfire fighting operations. And also asking for like an extension to cap and trade and a number of other things. Those are all being tabled, is according to the news this morning. But they've identified other funds at a lower amount to assist and provide funding to CAL FIRE for wildfire operations. What I read into it was that CAL FIRE was agnostic in terms of whatever funds are provided. They just have highlighted that based upon what we've seen recently, they need additional funds to protect our communities. And so the state and legislature and government are working on identifying how to provide additional funds to do that.
And I know that's not transportation, so I don't want to, I could rabbit hole us in a second, but I won't.
Right. Well, it is interesting when it potentially impacts transportation funds and you're trying to figure out which funding we have that we're relying on for future budgets, and then also those may go away. So
And when you have a governor who doesn't care, right? Who knows what'll happen?
Cares about his own agenda.
Okay, any other
Anything
questions for
else?
Sean? Seeing none, we will move on to item 9. Have any board members attended anything on behalf of SRTA to report?
Yes, there was a board meeting for CalCog and just going over legislation pending. I think the most interesting thing that maybe you could talk about, Sean, is the pivot from cap and trade to cap and invest. Is that the new proposed. So
Yes.
your gas tax, part of why our gas is so high is because cap and trade dollars come out of what you pay at the pump, as well as I'm sure many other things. And that money, while it is a mystery to many of us, goes somewhere. It's a lot of money. And this is part of the funding for moving to electric vehicles and the mandates and all that type of stuff. So cap and trade dollars, and it's in what the iteration is we have right now goes in until 2030, I believe. And so they need to then either create a new legislation to continue it. And I think in this process of leading up to it, they're trying to decide how they're going to structure cap and trade now, and the money that how they collect it, where they collect it, what they do with it. So there's been a bit of information and a pivot on right? Isn't it they're gonna try well, nothing's done yet, but they're dropping it as cap and invest.
Yeah, so that was a recent term the governor introduced as part of May revised budget proposal that he had. So the current cap and trade program was a 10-year bill done by the legislature. It goes until 2030. Traditionally, what we have seen is this is at least the second iteration, 10-year iteration of cap and trade, that the state legislature starts those conversations 4 to 5 years before it is set to expire to talk about what that looks like. The current cap and trade program provides various amounts to different types of programs and projects across the state in a bunch of different arenas that affect our communities for benefit or non-benefit, depending on how you want to look at it. But there is a component in there that has always been less supported by many, is the fact that state legislature has a 15% allowance to use it for whatever they want. What recently has happened is there's a group that has put together a coalition that I know California League of Cities, CSAC, several other different groups, the California Transit Association, as well as CalCog, have gotten behind that says they're not calling for an extension to cap and trade. But what the coalition says that if the state legislature is looking at it, these are the number of different priorities that they have, that they proposed. And the difference there is that a component of that is related to wildfire management. There's a component of dealing with the states if they stick zero emission requirements, especially for cities and counties. For example, solid waste management and those types of zero emission vehicles were called out specifically as a program of a need of how to address to have money under the cap and trade to go to that to help support cities and counties. Transit was included as part of that. Wildfire management also was a big part of that. Wildfire management as well as wildfire suppression on those efforts. The one interesting thing in the proposal, which is literally a page summary, essentially it calls for no discretion by the state legislature. In other words, it says they're assuming right now, because the current cap and trade program is roughly $4 billion a year, they use the same assumption now and says these are all the programs and 100% goes to those programs, and there's no extra discretion to just move around and do what the state legislature wants. Another state legislature needs to worry about budgets and general fund and other things in a proper manner. So they're asking for in that coalition. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm sure there will be conversations over the next few months on that.
Vanessa, that was very smooth. You said you attended a CalCog meeting and you got Sean to give the report.
Well, because the board meeting is pretty much assumes that you work in this every single day and and they start the conversation like 3/4 of the way through. And they're like, yeah, make a decision. Here's one bit of information. And what do you guys think about that? And you're like, okay, well, you nerds are doing this all day, no offense. I also feel like I'm a nerd, so that was a compliment. But all the way, you guys are, this is your sole job. And we have 50 of you, different sections. Right. So it's like when we come into the meeting, but I only say that so that when you hear this new terminology, cap and invest, it is basically a new iteration of cap and trade. And so it is interesting to see that, I'm assuming, so then it's been around for 20 years or almost 20 years. that it's pivoting. Obviously, as the federal government is saying, we have new standards, what you're doing, you can't do it the same way, but you are, again, collecting $4 billion from taxpayers in the form of this gas tax. The gas tax that we all know that goes to fund our cities and stuff is this is on top of that as well. It's why our gas is so high, is because we pay at the pump. I want to say no.
Well, I was just gonna say, one correction I should help with there is the cap and trade program is regulation on all industries across the board in the state.
Okay, well, yes.
Pollution.
Right.
And a portion of that does filter down to impacting what we pay at the pump.
Right.
But there's other industries
all
as well,
kinds of-
such as
right.
utilities and
Yes.
others.
Thank you. So why we pay more for sorry, that's better. Why we pay more for electricity, why we're paying more for transportation, why we pay more for every single thing in California, why it's so expensive to live here is there's many factors, but a big one to the tune of 4 billion is the cap and trade program that we have. It is just a very hot heating blanket, which I could use right now, but not economically. Over California, which is a lot of the reason why it's so expensive to live here. So in an effort to overcorrect on climate change, we're just going to continue to do that. We have this cap and trade program. So when you hear cap and invest or that type of thing, I just think it's important, since we're all in this world, to know that that's what they're talking about. And I'd also say that especially for our county representatives that are on RCRC or CSAC, when they're talking about this, they're looking for input about how this maybe should be spent. I know that in El Dorado, when you had the Caldor fire, you have all these regulations now to rebuild, and they were, the one of the strategies was, why don't you ask for cap and trade dollars? Because that is, if wildfires are a function of global warming, then they should do the cleanup to get them up to speed on regulations that they normally would not have had to, because their houses had already been built and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, there is a bit of an effort to maybe take some input as to how that should, I know transportation wants input as to how cap and trade dollars should be spent, because the discussion is happening now. So you can be against it. We should all be against paying this much. I'm totally fine with that. But if they're looking for input and our county representatives have that opportunity, pay attention at least to hear what it is, the direction that they're going. If you can add input and perspective. That's what it's going to be called. That is the working title right now, which means it's up for some interpretation. And I just think you guys could probably have more impact on that. So I just want you to be aware of it.
Thank you for that update.
Yeah.
Anybody else attend anything on behalf of SRTA?
Chair, can I make a comment on cap and trade?
Like how long?
Ready?
You,
3 minutes.
My understanding, timing, it's my understanding that 20 years ago, or whatever it was, 15 years ago, when the first iteration came through.
Sorry.
Based on, we taxed corporations that were polluting based on climate change, which you all now know I think is a lie. But we said, you're gonna pay. We're gonna take those monies and distribute it. So this is now just iteration after iteration. Time me, Chris.
30 seconds.
But the fact of the matter is, they don't have to stop polluting. So if they're paying based on, we have a problem with our climate and greenhouse gas emissions, they're still producing greenhouse gas.
Yeah, but
emissions.
they have
We're
to.
trading.
They have
It's
to-
trading.
But my point is, if it's not based on truth, they're just getting taxed and people are deciding how to spend it when based on what they're calling facts. So I think it's really important that if we understood actually what they're doing and not doing, which is they're not spending $4 billion stopping polluting, because that's actually maybe not the hugest problem. They're just paying for the legislature's pet projects.
So you think that air that we buy from British Columbia in the form of credits isn't really helping?
I don't know, Chris. Yeah. It's just saying. So.
Well, if they can sue now.
Because I could be wrong, but that's what they're actually doing. What's actually happening.
Correct.
Thank you, Chair, for.
Climate change is not on the agenda.
I got it.
Oh, no,
No, but cap and trade.
it's always on an agenda.
Cap and trade is.
It is.
It was on, cap and trade, which is.
Okay, I think we should move on to item 10, which is to approve the fiscal year 25-26 Annual Transportation Needs Assessment. And we have a tag team presentation.
Yes, we do.
There's three of them.
So Jen and Jessica, J and J. Let's
Ron, do I need to be invited to be a presenter?
You do not. You have access now. You should see the green share button down at the bottom.
Okay, thank you. There we go, it's starting. All right, so. Sure. Okay, good morning, Chair Watkins, board members, partners, and I don't know if we have any members of the public. My name is Jennifer Pullum, and I'm a transportation planner here at SRTA. There are 7 staff recommendations on item 10, and this item wraps up the transit needs assessment process and the Transportation Development Act budget for operating year 25-26, which starts July 1. I'm presenting the first 3 recommendations regarding the transit needs assessment. Chief Fiscal Officer Jessica Carlson will present the Transportation Development Act, which is our recommendations 4 and 5. Director Sean Tejan will actually present on some policy edits to the Transportation Development Act that SRTA has. And lastly, the 7th recommendation is a standard recommendation that staff provides so that our director can make minor changes without having to return to this board for approval. The transit needs assessment analyzes transit availability, demand, performance, community input on potential needs, and lastly, potential service improvements. In the past years, the transit needs assessment resulted in seasonal bus service to Whiskeytown National Recreation Area, transit on Sundays, transit in the Intermountain region between Bernie and Fall River Mills, and transit along the Knighton Road, serving the Veterans Home, the VA Clinic, and the Reading Regional Airport. After analysis for this fiscal year, again on transit availability, demand, performance, community input on potential unmet needs, and lastly, potential service improvements, staff recommends that the board find that there are no new transit needs considered reasonable to meet to operate for operating year 25-26, and to allow several RABA transit service changes implemented this operating year, 24-25, to get established, and they'll be evaluated in this coming year. The Social Services Transportation Advisory Council concurs with our recommendation and provided a letter stating such that is attachment A to your staff report. The final transit needs assessment and unmet transit needs recommendations were provided via a link to you that is on the SRTA website, and that is attachment B, and that pertains to staff recommendation number 2. And my 3rd staff recommendation is for this board to find by resolution that no new unmet transit needs are considered reasonable to meet for 25-26, to allow the numerous changes that RABA has implemented this year to get established and then evaluated. That resolution is attachment C. I will now pass the presentation over to my colleague.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Our annual TDA budget has been prepared for your consideration. The news everybody chomps at the bit for is our other eligible uses after STA and LTF are taken into consideration for our transit obligation. The great news is that John Ando, transit manager from RABA, has taken great steps to get as much federal funding into our transit program and services here in the region. By a lot of that comes from consolidating with both the county about 1.5 years ago and with our CTS, Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, Dignity Health Connected Living, transit provider consolidation with their services so that they can better collaborate and consolidate services and have those funding sources come directly to RABA to, again, offset their transit obligation to the region that would otherwise be covered by state transit assistance funds and local transportation funds. Don't worry, I'm not nervous. I'm just sorry. So attachment D here is pretty detailed. So I like to also just skip over to attachment. I did make a new attachment for you guys, attachment E, which gives more of a regional perspective of the flow of Transit Development Act funding. So again, these are pretty regional numbers. They start at your transit obligation, which is what we have to pay for after all those federal, based on RABA's budget that I believe went to the board earlier this week. Yeah, for RABA's board. I believe it was Monday this week. So RABA's asking, allocating a total budget of 6.3 million. 4.2 of those are in those federal funds that I was just referring to. And then our STA is coming in at 2.1 million. And I want to be clear, I don't want to have any confusion. If you look at the table on page 3 of the report, it will show you that public transit for RABA is 1.5 million. So it's, if I can just, I'm sorry, I just point. So this 1.5 million in STA, that has to do with the fiscal year 25-26 STA estimates coming to the region. But we also have to remember that we true up from the most recently audited year, which was fiscal year 23-24. And we also are going to be discussing STA policy amendments that we would like to present to the board for consideration, which will increase that 1.5 allocation by nearly $1 million by redispersing STA reserve funds that SRTA has been holding on to and giving that to RABA this year to offset their transit obligation. So that's where we get that $2.1 million. Okay. All right. So after we have federal funds applied, and then we have the STA funds applied, we have 0 transit obligations left. That's good. And that's good because all the rest of your local transportation funds, subtracting your priorities, which we have 3 priorities in this region. There's more than 3 explained in the Transit Development Act, but items like 10%, up to 10% for rail, we don't currently use in the region. We use these 3 priorities right now. Priority 1, planning and TDA administration. That goes to SRTA for local match funds for planning programs and administration of the Transit Development Act throughout the year. So those type of things. So that's LTF that comes to us as a planning agency. Priority 2, 2% for bike and ped. This is off the top again. So as you go down priorities, subtract what you have available for LTF, that 10.8 million. Subtract 1.7, the remaining 2%, up to 2% goes to bike and ped. This number is less than 2% because of a true up. So moving on to priority 3, up to 5% for the CTSA, which this year again is going to RABA so that they can use DHCL as the transit operator for that CTSA program or that consolidation effort. After those 3 regional priorities are deducted from that 10.8, the rest is for Article 8, which is other eligible transit uses in the region, which we tend to prefer to use on streets and roads projects. And so each jurisdiction is getting 100% of their proportion of LTF, which is an increase from last year of 8%. And it's a total 10-year average increase of 16.8%. Not to confuse you with numbers. So we're going up, up, up. Trend line is still going up on LTF. Everybody's getting their fair share. And before I move to Sean about the policy updates and those type of things and how that's going to impact this STA allocation, which has been considered in this budget, I want to make that clear. We have, it would be the passing of the amendments that Sean is going to discuss that would enact this specific budget. If the board chooses not to, we would have to see what the impact of that would be. Before I move to Sean, any numbers, budget, finance questions?
Okay, at our executive meeting, you had a lot of questions, Matt. So she's changed the tables and the lines. Do you have any questions there?
I'm good.
Boy, you have done.
Move to a vote, Greg.
You have to make a motion.
That's what's at all times.
Isn't that right? Thank you for the information on that. That's great, yeah. It's color coordinated.
I know, it's fantastic.
Anything else, budget wise? Sorry.
It was beautiful. That was beautiful.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Oh, wait, we had to. Thank you. I appreciate the vote of confidence.
But we'll keep you in queue.
I just was excited that if Matt did all the work before and doesn't have any questions.
Oh, and Tanessa and Greg are also on the Fiscal and Policy Committee, which if it's important to you, they have endorsed concurred with our recommendations. Sean, do you want to discuss the STA pricing revision?
Yeah, I'll go over it very briefly here. So as part of some discussions with our city, county and transit partners, and a item was requested, to help streamline our process and be more efficient with the transit only dollars, was to remove what previously we had as what we called an STA, State Transit Assistance Spillover Policy. The two sections in attachment H that would be amended are section, chapter 3.25 in a non-motorist program, as well as section 4.60.020 methods related to estimating STA revenue. Specifically, the reason for the spillover many years ago was the fact that on the county side, the county continued to accrue a significant amount of STA because Raba's service area was not the entire county. So we're very particular about allocating STA funds by jurisdictional region, population, and service area. That has since changed the last couple of years, so does the types of services that we have. And the STA spillover policy was specifically so that way we could have a way to be able to start allocating transit-only dollars that the county wasn't using, because the county was successful in acquiring FTA 5011 and 5311F funds that ended up covering, for most years, all of your transit obligation that you had. A few years, you would dip into STA funds, but still, it would continue to accrue. So spillover policy was meant to allow for an exchange with this. So the city of Reading commonly used it to exchange a portion of their LTF for the STA dollars to be able to, because Reading always ends up having to utilize some LTF till this last couple of years, as well as sometimes the cities of Anderson and Shasta Lake for transit operations costs. The STA spillover policy amendment would essentially do away with the spillover policy and allow us to efficiently streamline the process to do our STA funds upfront as a regional total. So just like what Jessica showed, where we do FTA funds first, and then the whole STA amount as one sum. The request from the local agency partners was still to informationally track it. So we will do that as part of the big detailed form. But essentially our goal is at the beginning of the year, we would allocate our full estimated amount of STA dollars. What does this mean in terms of change? Well, it streamlines our process. It does have an impact to our regional non-motorized program. One of the things that we did as part of the STA spillover policy is it allowed a portion of funds to be able to also go towards to augment the 2% non-motorized set-aside program. That would no longer be the case. So as a region moving forward, we would only be allocating to the regional non-motorized program the 2% set aside within TDA. Those are the changes that we have there. With that, if the board approves the action, as mentioned in the staff report, we have a current balance right now of 961,000 plus whatever dividends works in the investment program, funds that we want to allocate to RAVA this fiscal year. As part of the transit operations. From RAVA's budget perspective, we understand that will offset some of their initial requests for SB 125 funds. Those funds will sit longer the accounts accrued to interest to help offset future operational costs. With that, I'll hand it over to the chair for.
Okay, so there's two things. There are no unmet transit needs, and we have a resolution 2509, but I want to open it up to public comment. If there is anybody that would like to address any of these items that are here present. Your chance is going. We'll close the public comment.
Make sure Amy didn't have any online.
I do not.
Yeah, is there anybody online?
No.
No. So it remains closed.
I'm Sean. Let me introduce Dave. I'm sorry. I feel like that maybe people think he's a member of the public.
Good morning.
No, he's leadership. I see.
Okay, good.
My name is Dave Kontop, and I'm the new Director of Transportation at Dignity Health Connected Living, and entering in the new agreement as a CTSA provider with Raba come July 1. I'm looking forward to working with you.
Thanks, Dave.
So you're partly why we have no unmet transit needs.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Now I entertain this motion.
I will. Ms.
A motion.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved by Cry and seconded by Caltrans. You want to do a roll call vote, Amy? Or do we?
You can do
No.
it.
You don't need-
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. So we are on number 11. And Jessica is to approve the 25-26 comprehensive budget.
I don't.
Okay.
It's really simple. So I'm getting this in. I'm going out soon. I'll be out until probably October. And so I wanted to make sure you guys saw our planning budget for this upcoming fiscal year, starting next Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday. Don't be discouraged, even though our revenues and expenditures are going down, we're still at $23 million in revenue and 20 in expenditures. A very important question that Matt brought up board member Plummer, excuse me.
I know him, Matt, you.
Oh, is that,
So
whatever
I'll,
you prefer, okay. It's typically when you see budgets, you're gonna see that your revenues match your expenditures, and that's an accounting procedure. Definitely accurate. What I wanted to point out here is as a comprehensive budget, this is an internal document just for the agency. We bring it to you in regular periods, including budget to actual reports, almost every board meeting. And the reason that our revenues don't match our expenditures is just because there are multiple programs that we administer that are multiple years long. And then there are some that fund upfront, and there are some that we ask for more money ahead of time in the first year and not so much in the second and third year. And then there's some rules from our overall work program, or what we call OWP, that says you have to program an entire competitive discretionary grant. For instance, we're going to update our Go Shasta plan this year, and we have to anticipate award, program the full amount, even though it's might be a 3-year project, let's say. And so sometimes these numbers don't align perfectly. The accounting rules are still being followed. We are still having, what they do is we have net fund changes, if you will, and those will show up in our financial statements, which we'll go over in October. But I just wanted to explain that for those of you that see budgets all the time. The reason this comprehensive budget is different between revenues and expenditures is for that reason, just these nuances of grant programs. Otherwise, our revenue is expected to cover all of our planned expenditures. And I'm willing to take any questions.
The board member have a question. So I see there's 34 million for the Pitt River Bridge replacement. About a year ago, we had a presentation on the Golden Gate replica light. So that's moving forward.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Yeah, Tim, I don't know if you want to talk about that. I'll just talk briefly. The Bureau, about a year and a half ago, there was a joint effort for someone else, for Caltrans, that there was a joint effort that was done. Bureau Reclamation owned the Pitt River Bridge, but then they worked with Caltrans for maintaining that facility. There's a desire down the road that Pitt River Bridge, the Bureau of Rec wants to eventually not own that bridge anymore. They have current contracts on managing it and owning it through at least 2040. Caltrans, SRTA, and Bureau of Rec had applied for 2 different funds to try to fund some early environmental studies that need to be done, inspection studies and other studies related to the bridge, to then be able to eventually pursue the capital funds needed in the future. And also fund some further design beyond the concept that they have. So far, there's been 34 million that has been secured through a Bureau of Rec grant for aging infrastructure. Caltrans, Bureau of Reclamation are working on the agreements to figure out how to be able to provide the portion of those funds to Caltrans while using the other amounts as future leverage for future grant applications. Either based upon an email this morning, I know that Caltrans are looking to apply for a large infrastructure bridge call for projects this summer. We'll be working on a support letter for that to help with some of the early work. So it's a long project, it's a long process for there, but we just want to highlight that in there, that's one of the number of programs that we have in this region where our planning and programming activities help support that happening and working with those partners across the board. But they're in early efforts, so I'll look to Caltrans if there are any other updates on that now, but I don't know that we have much more.
I can just share with you that Caltrans is committed to communicate with you all. We actually have a team that is designated for the Pitt River Bridge coordination. Sean mentioned we're an affiliate, we're a user, and we have in contract to maintain. That's really where we stand. We also have some work going forward to implement some funds that come in. Just logically, that makes sense for us to lead some of this. We developed the project initiation document that had renditions of what this could look like in the future that queues us up to get funding to see things through. So we are in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. But if anyone at any given time wants an update, we actually have a designated project manager for this and can bring that to you at any time. We do lead and help host a lot of the affiliations to try and get funding for this, just based at being a transportation department. So at any given point, if anyone wants to have a communication on that, let us know.
Chair, can I ask?
Yeah, you may ask one question.
My understanding, I did a tour with Caltrans. It was wonderful. We went across the bridge and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the owners of the bridge now
Bureau of Reclamation.
Bureau of Reclamation? They're releasing that in 2040. They're like, they don't want it anymore. Is that my understanding? Or
Under 99
am I
year
getting one of these? Because
I do believe it could be a little sooner than that. If I understand when their actual term is up, it has some radical complications, given that it has the rail line, last of the rail lines underneath, and those contract timelines don't align. So the way I understand it is there could be iterations of negotiation to try and stall some of that because it doesn't have an owner after that. Caltrans doesn't own that. It's not our asset.
Well, the problem is the Bureau of Reclamation built it when the dam was built.
Sure.
And they own it, and they'd like to get rid of it, but there's nobody that wants to take it, and they might be stuck with it longer than they think.
It's pretty complicated.
it's very.
You're not wrong.
That was my understanding. We shouldn't put anything off. We should really get to talking about it now. Right?
Lots
Because
of
it'll
conversations
take
happening.
15 years to do
Might take
anything.
50. It's already been there, 80.
This is something that Sean and our director and a few others have continued to have conversations at the Washington DC level and recognizing that this isn't just something we can muster up and get done with various grant programs.
Right.
So I can commit that those conversations will and are ongoing. It's a delicate conversation just because of the ownership, and it takes the Bureau leading with initiation because of the ownership. As a maintain only department, we don't have a lot of authority, but we do recognize that we do have an asset that's heading towards poor condition. And so I can just promise you that there are a ton of conversations going. If at any point though, you feel like you don't have all the information that you need, please let us help provide that to you, whether it's formally or informally, it's a welcome.
Information therapy.
We need to open up to public comment. Anybody here would like?
I appreciate
budget.
I appreciate what you do and how you do it.
And do we have anybody online that want to comment?
I do not.
Public comment? We're open for a motion.
I'll just say that, thank you for the chart. That is easy to read, easier to read than it was, and the numbers actually line up, so that's always great. Percentages on the front are
And then,
accurate now.
yeah, and then we have, we did add, we added two illustrations as well that help you see the planning funds in all different types of ways too, so. We added that as well.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Awesome, thank you.
It's been moved by Kelcher and seconded by Aaron. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. We are now on approve a resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a 3-year agreement with EcoInteractive program software for a maximum cost of $139,000. So Keith, tell us why we need this.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the board, partners, members of the public. I am presenting on CERTA's staff recommendation to contract with EcoInteractive for the provision of transportation programming software. What is transportation programming? The short answer is a kind of reservation for the use of specific types of transportation funds, and usually federal funds, because most of our programming is related to the development of the Federal Transportation Improvement Program, or FTIP, if it were only as simple as reserving funds. Transportation programming is complex and time-consuming. State and federal funding have different programming requirements. Funding programs vary on how and when funds may be used, and which documentation and authorizations are required, and when. Projects may receive funding for all phases of development or just one. Grant funds usually require some kind of local match, but sometimes it's leverage, or sometimes it's toll credits. And the match, toll credits, or leverage requirements depend on the grant program. And all this information needs to either be programmed or accounted for at each step of project development to ensure proper delivery. And just when you think you have it all mastered, funding programs change the requirements, or those programs disappear altogether. However, staff nimbly try to anticipate these situations and plan for new paths forward. When questions surface related to any of this time-dependent information, staff at all levels of government may be occupied with any number of tasks competing for their attention. And it can be hard for CERTA staff to A, know the status of partners' projects at any given time, and B, elicit the information necessary to ensure project funding keeps flowing. CERTA, Caltrans, and local agency staff communicate by email, phone, virtual and in-person meetings. When project information is exchanged, interpreted, written down, and later programmed or reprogrammed by CERTA staff. Staff enter this information into state-maintained software developed over a quarter of a century ago, and use different software programs to create tables, documents, and emails for generating FTIP documents, amendments, administrative modification. Between communication with partners, assembling tables, figures, documents, and authorizations, etc., a lot goes into preparation of transportation programming. And there are many opportunities for miscommunication and error. After an amendment is approved, someone may realize they gave CERTA the wrong year for programming a project's construction funds, or an error might have occurred when updating a financial summary table to accurately reflect changes in funding since the last amendment. Or community feedback may postpone project delivery and impact the availability of funds. Or. Each time CERTA staff prepares an amendment or must rewrite a draft amendment to account for new or changed information, this means more staff time directed to transportation programming and less time directed toward planning activities that help the agency reach goals adopted by the board of directors in the regional transportation. Transportation programming complexity is not unique to CERTA. Since 2005, more and more MPOs across California and across the country have transitioned to using more modern subscription-based software to manage and automate much of their programming activities. CERTA staff have researched software used by peer agencies and what is available on the market. EcoInteractive is the only company offering the software. CERTA staff would like to reduce the programming workload, making the process more efficient from the local to the federal level. Improve communication with partners, improve public engagement, track project delivery, improve performance monitoring, reduce the amount of staff training associated with programming, and reduce the likelihood of loss of funds to the region. The software offered by EcoInteractive can help facilitate all these improvements. In addition to aiding transportation programming, a core agency function, software has add-on modules that could assist with staff with calls for projects for regional funding opportunities and with preparation and maintenance of the regional transportation plan. another core agency function. We currently rely on senior staff to set aside their work on other agency business to train new programming staff on all the technical steps required to produce and manage the FTIP. Programming training is essential for the transfer of knowledge related to this key agency task. Only different programmers have different filing conventions and programming styles. If we move forward with EcoInteractive software, agency programming will be less dependent on the user, and the agency will have more uniform programming. EcoInteractive offers a few software trainings to all programming staff, and the on-call assistance is offered throughout the course of the subscription. SRTA staff is seeking approval for up to $139,320 for 3 years of use of this software, with $90,000 serving as the baseline amount for the programming software, and the rest pertaining to any add-on modules added in the future if the executive director thinks they're worth the investment at that time. So that concludes my presentation. We do have representatives from EcoInteractive attending virtually, I believe, if the board has any questions.
So the way I understand it, this is a sole source, and the only reason it's a sole source is that EcoInteractive has found a niche, and they're the only ones that would provide this sort of software, and you see it as very valuable to serve.
Thank you.
Any board?
Yes.
How does the, oops, sorry. I didn't have my hand up. Vanessa had her hand up. So,
Okay.
So we already have this in the budget. Is that what does that understand that fiscal impact? It says that we already have this in the budget. We're really basically adding another $2,500
Yes.
into what we had already planned for this type of project management software.
Correct.
And this is basically a project management software so that people can get up to date quicker. My only question is there something like that for the electeds to be able to know what the hell is going on at any given time on any given project as well? We have access to this.
That is this.
That is this. Okay, so
On that end, to answer your question, there is a public facing component it would also be part of the public review. Each time there's amendment or administrative modification, there's a public review period. This software allows to provide all of that information in much more digestible reports that the current CTIP system does not allow for. That the public review agencies, so if there's Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, FAA, if you happen to have an airport project that fits in the FTIP that for some reason we have to have in there, all those agencies can review it, as well as elected officials and the general public. So there will be project information available online.
digestible, if you can, read,
I mean, that's
like
subjective.
a 2nd-century Aramaic script or Mandarin. Other than that, it's very digestible. I have a question for you really quick. Obviously, that's not a lot of money for this. So is this going to possibly be, because if it's new and it's a sole source, which I understand very much about the sole source, is this 139 going to jump to like 350 next year because we start using it and now we're married to it and they jack it up?
It's a good question.
It's a great question. Because that's what sole source a lot of times does.
Right.
They get you to adopt it, they get everybody liking it and say, well, hey, it's great, but. So that's my only concern.
Well, this
not for
is a
3 more
3-year
years.
contract.
Not for 3 more years.
3-year contract, and we have escalation factored in for CPI. But yeah, that's the answer. It's just normal.
So it's alarming how cheap it is now, which honestly, that's what scares me is like.
Well, we did look around at the other MPOs that are using it and MPOs of similar size, and we made sure to negotiate down. It was higher, but we negotiated then down to something comparable to a recent contract with Tulare.
All right, I'll add to that, board member Cry, that I am not as concerned. One, EcoInteractive has been around since 1993. We've also looked at different contracts exist. Nice thing about government is a lot of it is public info, so we're able to look at the other agency contracts and how they negotiate those. And because we're also a small agency, I don't anticipate. I think that's why our costs are a little lower. Because we're a small agency, we don't do nearly as much. We don't need as much support versus some of your big metropolitan and regional planning agencies. They're going to have massive budgets, but they're dealing with, 30 cities and 6 counties and all the other
I
stuff.
mean, I can just speak for what I've seen at the county. When I look back at 10 years ago, when we started with a contract that was 87,000 and now it's like 2.9 million. But anyway, I make a motion to approve.
One full question.
Do we have any public comments on this?
Matt had
I have a question.
Okay, Matt, we'll let you go first.
All right, just to clarify, this is not replacing something else that we're currently using. This is basically doing what we've done manually, and automating that in a sense, or automating pieces of that.
Kind of augmenting what exists. I mean, we are currently working with the state provided software, but like I said, it's over a quarter of a century old and less intuitive, and doesn't have the capacity to do as much. We will be able to do more with EcoInteractive and consolidate a lot of what we produce onto just this one page that is easily accessible by the public, board members, staff.
And this will integrate with the state system.
It will, yeah.
Okay,
Motion still sticks.
so is there anybody in the public or online that would like to comment on this? I would note that in 3 years, you're going to get the vote on it again, whether we continue this contract. So
Oh, yeah.
goes up too much.
Unless somebody
With your
hits me with
chair,
a Prius.
you'll be able to kill it.
Yeah. No, this one, no.
Yeah.
Gallagher's going to be chair.
No, 3 years from now. He's next year.
He'll do it forever. Once Gallagher gets in there.
Chair Watt.
Okay,
Wow.
so Gallagher has seconded
That's
it.
already.
That's the second.
No, I didn't hear Tanessa. It's Gallagher.
Chair Watkins, for the record, there
Or
was no.
something, let's celebrate.
It was by Cry and Gallagher.
No, Tanessa.
I think
No, I didn't hear her.
Gallagher
got
gets it.
Oh,
Let him have it.
okay.
Yeah. She can't get all the stuff.
Staff is going, these elected are.
I think it's like.
It's all right. It's kind of boring, but we got it settled.
It's okay.
All in favor? Passes. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. Felt like I was on the card thing.
Okay, can you believe it? We are right on schedule. Does any board member have a future? Yeah.
I do, I would like a temperature policy, that temperature cannot drop below a certain amount. We need to-
Get warm.
It is not, it's
Oh, I
fantastic.
didn't do anything.
Otherwise, we have to bring a plane. But I move that I never sit here ever again.
I will wear a jacket next time.
Okay, can we set?
Can we move the chair and vice chair over here?
I'll tell you what, you work on that after.
Switch
the
over
meeting.
Yes, sir, I will, I'll do that.
Well, what we do is let's not put a chair where John's sitting next time because that's what's causing the whole thing.
I think you're right.
It's too warm.
The only, anybody have a future other than temperature here?
Have a future?
Nobody
Someday.
else has a future. And we can't get the second.
Be a future topic that would be on the Shasta Dam raise. I was up there at their 80th anniversary last Friday, and I think that is a project that would affect the economy and the transportation quite a bit in Shasta County. And so there'll be a future date where we might want to hear a presentation on raising Shasta Dam 18.5 feet, because this year they spilled 600,000 acre feet. And if Shasta Dam had been raised 18.5 feet, it would have held an extra 600,000 acre feet, and they would not have had to spill the drop. And they spilled that between January 5th and January 20th, 14-day period. They lowered that lake and wasted 600,000 acre feet. Well, anyway,
We'll make a note of that.
We'll make a note of
Item
that.
In the future, we hear anything.
we are adjourned.